No.
Oh, geez.
No worries.
Okay, it's 3 o'clock. So I would like to welcome everyone to this historic Wellington Shire Council meeting this Tuesday, 5th of May 2020. And may I also add that this is also an historic moment for myself, being the first meeting that I've chaired as Deputy Mayor. So please be kind, everyone. So moving on to the procedural A1 requirements, as per the Minister's Good Practice Guidelines, MGPG1 virtual meetings, we are required to do a councillor roll call. The requirements for this is that councillors need to confirm that they meet all three of the following: that they can hear proceedings, that they can see other members in attendance and can be seen by other members, and that they can be heard to speak. So I will go through the list of councillors, and if you could say that yes, you can hear and see proceedings. Councillor Stevens.
Yes, Deputy Mayor, I can certainly see you and hear you, and I hope that you can hear me.
I can, thank you. Councillor Ripper?
I can visually see and hear.
Thank you, Councillor Ripper. Councillor McCubbin?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I can see and hear everybody.
Councillor Bye?
Yes, Mayor, I can see and hear everybody.
Councillor Rossetti?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I can hear and see everybody.
Councillor Crossley?
Yes, I can hear and see as required.
And Councillor Hull?
Yes, Deputy Mayor, I can see and hear, and I am in attendance.
That's good to know, Councillor Hull, and I can confirm that I myself can see and hear you all as well. So moving on to A1A, the council meeting information. As the COVID-19 social distancing requirements remain in place, the Minister for Local Government has issued the Minister's Good Practice Guidelines, MGPG1 virtual meetings. Pursuant to Section 87 of the Local Government Act 2020, these guidelines ensure that local government decision-making can continue in line with COVID-19 requirements, and further details can be found on the Local Government Victoria website. These guidelines take effect from the 1st of May 2020 and will remain in place through to the 1st of November 2020. While members of the public can no longer attend meetings in person, we have provided options for you to interact with us virtually via our council meetings page on the Wellington Shire Council website. You're able to interact with council in two ways. The first is by email through a specific question or comment relating to a particular council agenda item no later than 1 p.m. on the day of the council meeting. Or alternatively, for general communication with council via the webcasting chat room early in the meeting to ensure that your submissions can be dealt with by the end of the meeting. While we face a new way of gathering, we thank you for your continued support and look forward to a new way of keeping in touch with all of the Wellington Shire. Thank you. We'll move on to A1B, Statement of Acknowledgement and Prayer. Now, before I get to that, I seek your indulgence in offering our deepest condolences to the Mayor Councillor Alan Hall, his sons Simon and Nathan, and their families on the sudden loss of their most beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and friend Jill. To quote Nan Whitcomb's Thoughts of Nanushka, I am with you when you hurt. I am you. When you hurt, I hurt. Alan, your fellow colleagues, Wellington Shire family and the wider community stand with you. Lean on us as you need for as long as you need, as we are there. And we're all standing with you tomorrow in spirit. God bless. We move on to the statement of acknowledgement. Now, normally councillors are required to stand for this. However, I am more than happy that you remain seated. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Gunai people, and pay respects to their elders, past and present. Almighty God, we ask your blessing upon the Wellington Shire Council, its councillors, officers, staff and their families. We pray for your guidance in our decisions so that the true good of the Wellington Shire Council may result to the benefit of all residents and community groups. Amen.
Amen.
Moving on to apologies. Mr CEO, I acknowledge that Mayor Councillor Hall is an apology.
Yes, Deputy Mayor.
And is there anybody else?
No more apologies, Deputy Mayor.
Okay. A3, declaration of conflicts of interest. I believe that there are none. Is that confirmed, CEO?
No conflicts, Deputy Mayor.
A4, moving on to confirmation of minutes of previous council meeting. Now, this is on page 7 of our agenda. And I would like to ask Councillor By if he moved that.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I move that the Council adopt the minutes and resolutions of the Ordinary Council meeting of the 21st of April 2020.
And do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Crossley?
Yes, I'll second that, Mayor, Acting Mayor.
Does anyone oppose this motion? Silence indicates that this motion is carried. Thank you. A5, business arising from previous meetings. Is there any business arising from previous meetings, Mr. CEO?
No, Deputy Mayor, we have no note items nor notices of motion.
Excuse me, Madam Deputy Mayor. I do have an issue in regard to a question that was raised at the last meeting, which I'd like to deal with now, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor McCubbin.
Thank you. It's in regard to a question that was asked of the Council towards the end in our chat room by Mr Hayward of Pearsondale. We thank him very much for his question. The full question and the response is given in the minutes. I'll just précis that. It was in regard to the federal government's drought assistance grant and the fact that we use that to resheet gravel roads in the area of Dargo, Hayfield and Boysdale. And firstly, I'd like to thank Mr Hayward for this question. Very good question. It allows me to talk very about it. A really exciting thing, the fact that the council was able to get funding from the federal government. We thank very much our local member, I know was instrumental in this, to ensure that the local government gets some money to benefit farmers and their families. We know it's extraordinarily difficult to, in that grant, you can't just give money out to individuals. It must be for things which benefit the majority of farmers. We were very fortunate to have a committee of farmers which met and looked at some various proposals and were able to come up with some assistance on gravel sheeting on roads, on fixing up some roads, which I think that everybody will understand that in the farming community, roads are more than just places from going to A to B. They are really the pipeline of where their goods and services are entering their properties. Council's very keen, and you'll notice in the budget today that we certainly spend an enormous amount on rural roads. But with 3,000 kilometres of roads, it's very, very difficult to look after all of them. And this drought assistance funding was instrumental in being able to meet some of that backlog. If I can just answer the question more specifically. So in response to the feedback, Council determined to redirect these funds to resheeting gravel roads. This decision was supported by the Federal Government Department managing the Drought Community Programs funding because these activities aligned with those funding guidelines. The resheeting works were conducted along sections of the Wonnangatta Road in Dargo, the Tanamba-Seaton Road in Hayfield and the Woolshed Lane in Boysdale. These roads were selected because the roads are located in dry farming areas that were significantly impacted by the drought and were a high priority priority for resheeting works based on the assessment of their road conditions. Since then, the council has been able to successfully acquit the federal government grant funding, and of course there are other activities within that grant funding guidelines. Officers also sought feedback from our Councillors' Agriculture Industry Reference Group when we were looking for alternatives to resealing the GRLE car park. The Agriculture Industry Reference Group were very supportive of the council allocating funds towards the gravel resheeting, and might I say also it was run past the various councillors, and we were also very excited to be able to do this work, which has been required for some time. This is not the end of works on local roads, but it was very pleasing to be able to do some very much needed in some of the dry farming areas of our shire. I thank very much the ratepayer for making his comments on the chat room. Of course, you can also put them on cards if people are looking to make statements which we can answer perhaps in a bit more timely manner, and I hope that's answered the question appropriately. And thank you, Acting Mayor, for allowing me to say that.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you, Councillor McCubbin, for addressing that.
Deputy Mayor,
yeah.
Might I just request that cars be explained to those who might be watching the meeting?
My absolute apologies, and thank you, Councillor. CARS is a Councillor Action Response form. I think that's what it stands for. It's certainly available on the website. By locking into that and giving your name and address, council officers will get to you directly and be able to get back with a response. My apologies for using an acronym, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCubbin, for clarifying it. And may I say that the CARS process is a very adequate system. So thank you. Well, we've done A5. We're moving on to A6, acceptance of late items, which is on page 9 of the agenda. Councillor Stevens.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to move that Council accept the late item A6.1 for consideration.
Thank you. And do I have a second for that? Councillor Crosley, I see you there.
Yes, I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you. The mover of that late item, Councillor Hull.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to move that Council receive and note the updated information and concerns in respect of the proposed native timber phase-out, and 2, and initiate the establishment of a native timber industry task force to lobby the Victorian State Government in respect of the proposed native timber harvesting phase-out. That the task force membership includes, but is not limited to, representatives of the Wellington Shire Council, other impacted councils, Australian Sustainable Hardwoods in Hayfield, Radial Timber in Yarram, and the forestry contractors, and the Construction, Forestry, Maritime, Mining and Energy Union, or the CFMEU as it's advertised in the paper. So that's the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hull. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Ripper?
I'm happy to second it, Councillor.
Sorry, Councillor Rossetti? Okay, thank you. Does anyone oppose that motion? Then silence means that that motion is carried. Councillor Hull.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Most are aware that the state government very surprisingly introduced a phase down or close down of the native timber industry, and that would impact over 3,000 jobs just in Gippsland and several thousand more through the rest of the state, particularly on the eastern side of the Hume Highway. Wellington has been a leader in trying to ask the government for reasons for their decision and for the particular documents that were used to make the decision to be released, and we can't get any of that to happen. We believe that going on our own, looking after the interests of our industry, needs to be more forceful, and that's why this motion is to get a hard-hitting task force together and take the issue up with not only the relevant minister but hopefully with the Premier. we've got a problem, as you've noticed in the newspapers, that just recently 26 coops were now under suspension. They can't be used until the court reaffirms their existence and the availability, if it happens, until October. Now we've got a lot of mums and dads and little kids all wanting food in their mouths that are working in the timber industry, and we can't wait till October to see what the code of practice will be released. Now, the code of practice we're operating under at the moment is 2014, and it is so full of insecurities and uncertainty that nobody knows who can dance with who and what the music's going to be. So I think we've got to take the issue up by inviting the other councils that are affected, and forming this task force that will drive forward the ability and the strength that we need to protect the jobs in the timber industry in Gippsland. And the people we'll be talking to and trying to get hold of are people that, if they look behind the plaster on the walls of their homes, will find that the framing is all native timber, as it was in those days when the Victoria was growing after the war, and yet the timber industry is still there. We believe that the regrowth from after the 1939 fires would be perpetually regenerated. Well, that's certainly growing, and the industry believe that the silvertop crop, which is very similar to ash and alpine ash, will be made available if the ash forest goes down. And for reasons best known to the Secret Service in the government, even that has been closed up. So we do need to go out now and take the issue right up to the government and the ministers, and get them to explain what they're doing and what they're going to do to get our industry, which is a primary industry, back on track.
Thank you, Councillor Hole. Councillor Rossetti, did you want to have something to say, or?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to connect what Councillor Hole has just said with what Councillor McCubbin said a moment ago. In Councillor McCubbin's response to the question from Alan Haywood, he was actually responding in a transparent and open way about how a decision was made in a level of detail that really made it quite clear about the logic. What we're not getting from government in terms of this decision is the clarity and transparency in how the decision was made. It may indeed be, if we had that transparency, that we may understand indeed why they've made this decision. But the fact that it's just the responses are all fobbing off, not actually giving any indication of the decision process, the logic, the evidence, I think is a real slap in the face to another level of government, to all of our community, to all of the people who actually work in the timber industry, to all the people impacted by this change, to not explain, to not tell us what the reasoning is I think it's really poor form, and I commend Councillor Hole's motion, and certainly look forward to that coalition being able to hopefully find out more information about why this decision was made, and hopefully again we can get some sort of sensible decision process rather than what appears to be a decision made in a dark room.
Thank you, Councillor Rossetti. And can I just add how proud I was recently reading the latest month of The Home Beautiful, where a house was featured in Western Sydney, and the timbers were from radial timber. So it just shows how important our timber industry is, particularly to our building industry. So thank you. Moving on, A7 notices of motion, nil. A8, receiving of petitions or joint letters. Item 8A1, outstanding petitions. Mr. CEO, there are none.
No outstanding petitions, Deputy Mayor, no.
Thank you. Item A82, receipt of petition, Abels Road and Boyle Road, Longford ceiling proposal. This can be found on page 13 of the today's agenda. Councillor Bye.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to move the current motion, but then also make an amendment if I could. So I'll read the first one out. I move that Council receive the attached petition in relation to sealing of Abels Road and Ball Road in Longford. Now I'd like to propose an amendment to what was actually in the agenda. The amendment reads that Council receive the attached petition in relation to sealing of Abels Road and Ball Road in Longford and refer the request as a budget submission to Council's 2021 budget process.
Thank you, Councillor Bye. Do I have a seconder for that?
Yes, indeed. I'm happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor McCubbin. Do I have anyone opposing this motion?
Deputy Mayor, it's David the CEO. Just to be clear, given that that was the first time the councillor by moved that recommendation, it is in fact not not an amendment. That's the substantive motion. So it's basically the recommendation.
Okay, so that's fine. Okay, I recommend it.
Just to be clear.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Councillor Bye, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, I would, Deputy Mayor. This is an exciting thing that the petition states. It comes from people that reside along Abels Roads and Ball Road at Longford. There is in fact 18 properties along that road, and what this petition states is that there's 17 of the 18 residents would like Council to consider a special charge scheme to update that road and seal it. So it's quite exciting to get these sort of petitions, and especially for the road that is quite well used. So I will take that further and bring that back to Council maybe as a late budget submission.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bye. Moving on to A9, invited addresses, presentations or acknowledgements, as can be found page 18. There are none. A10, questions on notice, page 19 of the agenda. There are none. B, report of delegates, found at page 20. There are none. C, officers report, C1, chief executive officers report, that is nil. C2, general manager of corporate services, as can be found at page 23. Item C2.1, assembly of councillors. Councillor Bye.
Thanks again, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to move that Council note and receive the attached Assembly of Councillor records for the period 15th of April 2020 to the 29th of April 2020.
Thank you, Councillor Bye. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Rossetti?
Yes, I'm happy to second that motion.
Thank you. And can I ask whether anyone opposes this motion? And I take silence as the motion is carried. Thank you. Moving on to...
Deputy Mayor, would I be able to say something on that topic,
sorry.
please?
Yes.
Yeah, just thought I'd make out to the general population of the Wellington Shire that, hey, we're still working hard as ever. We're using technologies such as Teams, Skype and Zoom to do these type of meetings. Yeah, we are working hard. We're just doing it remotely and through the technology, but we're still out there representing the community.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bye. And can I also just add that we must also commend the community for how they have actually been able to adapt and work with us. It's certainly not been an easy task, but we're all getting there in the end. So thank you. Moving on to item C 2.2, adoption of the 2020 property revaluations. This can be found at page 28 of today's agenda. And yep. Councillor McCubbin.
Yes, I'd be happy to move that if I can.
And do I have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Rossetti?
I'm happy to second that motion as written.
I should just say that, Acting Mayor, I'd like to move that Council adopt the following valuation figures at the return date of the 1st of January 2020, as listed in the table as provided in the agenda document.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCubbin. Does anyone oppose this motion? And I take it that silence indicates that the motion is carried. Councillor McCubbin.
Thank you, and thank you very much for allowing me to have a bit of a chat about this. This is a very important document. Each year, the council is required under law to do an independent valuation of everybody's property within the Wellington Shire. This valuation is used to set the rates that you get for your particular property. There's a few things I need to explain to people, and one, that this is an independent process the council has no direct involvement in. However, and you will be sent these separately, your valuations. It is, of course, up to you, the ratepayer, to be able to oppose those, and you have a set and nominated period to do so. I think it's a month or so anyway. Look, it'll be on the document that you are sent. I do ask you and stress strongly that if you disagree with the valuation on your property, that you are to make that objection, and then it will be looked into further. If people can understand that the valuations are based on property prices as they occur in your particular region. Now, for some areas, this is very difficult to determine because there aren't a lot of property sales. And in fact, during this time of drought and a lot of problems within the dairy industry, within the industry, is well known. There has been a small number of properties which have been sold, thus the demand is high. And as I'll go on to explain in a minute, in actual fact, the price of rural land within these property valuations has gone up disproportionately to others. So the first point I want to make very strongly is these rate notices, these property values, are set independently, and please object to them if you seek a change to those. Once they've been locked in, pretty much the rates for your particular property is also locked in. Can I also say this to you though, the property values are not a direct indication of your rates. For example, if the property goes up by 10%, that doesn't mean that council's got a windfall, everything goes up by 10%. It's actually depends on the relative nature of them. So in other words, if the whole Shire went up 10%. If the whole Shire went up 10%, then in fact there's no change to your rates in the dollar. There's no change. What happens is though that if it's disproportionate. So in this particular thing, you'll find particular areas have gone up, particular areas have gone down compared to the average, particular sectors have gone up and particular sectors have gone down compared to the average. Council makes no more or less money from that. We set a value in the dollar and change it accordingly should the values come in. So I need to stress that the property values are not exactly your rate increase or decrease. They are simply your relative position in the pot, if you like. And I know that's extraordinarily complicated to understand. Can I just mention some broad scope here? And that, as I mentioned before, generally residential land within the Shire generally has only increased 2.96. Overall, the values within the Shire have improved 5%. So the take-home message today is if your property is under 5%, you're going to get a decrease, and if your property is over, you could expect an increase, all other things being the same. Of course, check your rates notice carefully. So the general improve for residential properties have only gone up 2.96, so below the average. The big one is actually vacant land. So if you actually own vacant land that's available for residential zoning, it's gone up 10%. The one that we're most concerned about, and we absolutely understand the pressures that people are going through, is the farm improved. That's gone up by 13%. Now, the reasoning behind that, I guess, is that the property valuations were done a bit earlier on, before the real hit for the drought, but also because that property prices, there hasn't been as many sales, they're telling us, and therefore it's difficult to find out what the true cost is. And I guess, realistically, farm prices have held up at this stage. That may be completely different next year. Farm bacon has in fact gone up even further to 17% and so on. Commercial properties have actually decreased, and particularly improved commercial properties have actually gone down in value throughout the Shire, reflecting, I think, the pressures on retail, not only this year with the drought, but over a number of years. So you'll find those to be. Now, it's not only those general sectors in terms of commercial or in terms of farming. It very much depends on where you live, because the property values are done on land sales within your particular municipality. So, for example, you have areas like Coongulla, which has gone up quite strongly. A lot of our farming areas have gone up. I think Blinn Gully is our biggest within the Shire due to some revaluations of plantation timber through there. Golden Beach has gone up strongly, and some of the coastal properties have. Kilmanie's, whereas areas like Kilmanie have only gone up 2.3%. Locksport's gone up 5%, about the average. Longford's only gone up 1.6%. Sales actually decreased slightly, or about remain the same. So there's not much change at all in the property values for sale. Rosedale's gone up 5.4, Stratford has gone up 4.8, which has been strong. Yarram's gone up 3.8, which is reasonably strong but below the average, and so on and so forth. You'll find areas like Merloo, which has gone up 12.8%, and other areas in those rural communities, that is where the valuations have increased more. Now, look, you don't need to worry about taking down those figures. Every ratepayer gets sent their property values in the mail. And as I stressed to you, that does not represent your rating increase or decrease. It represents your valuation. That then goes into the mix. That's determined the price in the dollar. That then determines the rates that we set throughout the Shire. So I stress further that if you don't agree with the valuations, it's all done independently, but please, if you disagree with the valuations, you have the option to put in the objection, and that is clearly explained to you in the documentation that can be sent with that. I will also stress, though, there is a legislative time period. We can't extend that, so you must get your objections in by the requisite time period. So the take-home message, our properties on average gone up 5%, and pretty much the farm rates have gone up more than that. The residentials and the commercials in particular have gone down below that. You'll find out very shortly exactly what your house is doing. And thank you very much, Mayor, for allowing me a bit of time to go through that.
That is, it's certainly important that everyone understands what the revals are about, and thank you, Councillor McCubbin, for doing that. Moving on to item C 2.3, resolve to advertise the draft 2020-2021 budget, proposed rates, fees and charges.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I move that one, Council advertise its draft 2020-2021 budget as attached, including fees and charges and multi-year capital projects in accordance with Section 129 of the Local Government Act 1989, and Council consider submissions to the draft 2020-2021 budget at a special Council meeting on Tuesday, 9th of June 2020 at 3 p.m. and Council meet on Tuesday, the 16th of June 2020 at 6 p.m. to consider the formal adoption of the 2020-2021 budget. And 4, Council make the following declarations regarding rates and charges for the period commencing on 1st July 2020 and concluding on 30th of June 2021. Mayor, it's a very long motion, which is printed in our agenda. I'm happy to read it all for you, but given the John Cleese nature of the description of the valuations, I'd like to take the rest as read.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rossetti.
And I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor McCubbin, as seconding that. And do I ask, does anyone oppose this motion?
Yeah, I oppose it, Deputy Mayor. Malcolm.
Councillor Hull opposes?
We only need to know that there's an opposition there, Deputy Mayor, and we can just move on from there.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, that's fine, Councillor Rossetti.
Thank you. The 2021 budget has been drafted against a backdrop of a number of challenges that we've had recently, drought, fire and COVID. And I think there's even some talk around about floods at the moment. These challenges continue to impact the community, and therefore the motion that that's put forward now is looking at not applying the 2% rate cap, but instead freezing the rates at 0% and maintaining the waste charges at existing levels. As a result of not taking up that 2% rate cap, it does forecast a substantial operating deficit of 1.1 million. However, council officers are currently working on finding savings during the 2021 financial year in order to contain that deficit. We also have capital grants set aside for the 2021 financial year to complete a number of infrastructure projects. And if we add these capital grants to our total budgeted result, this will reflect a surplus of about $15 million. These grants will assist Council to undertake capital works program of approximately $52 million. Also, as we emerge and start to recover from the COVID-19, we'll have more of an idea of how our community is faring and how our businesses have been impacted. So we'll certainly have a formal 6-month review as part of the budget process to happen early in 2021, just so that we can better understand the impacts of the recent challenges in case we may indeed need to further fine-tune our budget.
Thank you, Councillor Rossetti. Councillor McCubbin, would you like to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll reserve my right, please.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hull?
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Mayor. I suppose this is going against my better grain of wanting to do an increase in rates, but the attempts to equal last budget based on a 0% increase is fraught with danger. It will send us back in coming years, as we know, to meet the needs and demands of our ratepayers. Councils everywhere get bashed up in the media and beyond to cut rates and go back to roads, rates and rubbish. But does the government cut car registration, fire service levy, the EPA licence? Do the water and power companies decrease their rates? Local government went through no rate rises for 3 years after amalgamation, and people with good memories will recall the old and antiquated playgrounds, the very poor public conveniences, the Lake Guthrie as a cesspit, the sporting facilities in poor condition, all because there had been no increase in rates to meet the escalating costs of the goods and services. And eventually, the rates had to go up 7 and 8% to try and make Wellington into the beautiful little shire we've got today, or big shire. But today we have 3,300 kilometres of road to maintain. We've got 6 libraries, 6 pools, 1 big art gallery. We've got sporting facilities that we can be proud of. We also have the street lighting all and safety and security lighting all around the shire. We provide 300 jobs approximately. We have all the machinery and significant to maintain, and we provide significant community grants. There's also a looming potential payment for the defined benefit scheme, and this won't be cheap. Two of the things that really concern me is that the state and federal governments have delayed their grants to us, and normally we've got that money to work in with our budget, and this year we haven't got it. And I'm talking the FAGS grants and the Roads to Recovery money. If we have been watching the news, we'll see how deep in debt our state and federal governments have been to try and keep Australia going, to keep people with food in their tables and to make sure that those who lost their jobs have some sort of sustenance. The repayment's going to have to come from somewhere, and I feel that local government is going to be one of the first hit. So I'm going to ask Council to reject this budget as presented, and if that happens, I'm going to move that this Council requests, I'll be moving that this Council requests the CEO to prepare a budget for 2021 with a 2% government allowed rate increase. That's my opposition, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hull. Do I have another councillor that would like to speak for the budget?
Yes, Acting Mayor, I'd like
Councillor Crossley, go ahead.
Thank you. I think this is, as they say, unprecedented times, and I certainly acknowledged Councillor Hull's concern that this decision does have a compounding effect for the future, but I think this pandemic has a compounding effect on our community. This is not just a one budget event. To recover from this event is going to take a considerable amount of time and also a considerable amount of sacrifice by all levels of the community and levels of government. As you pointed out, Councillor Hall, that the state and federal levels of government have made considerable changes in their ideological stance of what they are spending to actually meet the new demands, this new world of this pandemic crisis. And I think the community would expect us to acknowledge their difficulties and to do the best cost savings that we can to take some of the pressure off their finances. So I think we are beholden to act upon that. And I think this budget not only keeps the rate rise at a freeze, it also keeps the important services that will require going. And also, as Councillor Rossetti pointed out, there's some $52 million of projects and infrastructure, which is really an economic stimulus for our community. So that spending is very important to keep those very important projects and facilities continuing. But I think it's really a crucial thing that we make these commitments to cut our costs, to look, and certainly the council officers have looked at savings. We're not looking at creating new positions that we were considering before this crisis occurred, but we really have to acknowledge that things have changed, and this is going to be a long-term issue that we have to address. And if we can relieve the rate burden on our community, I think it is beholden upon the council to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crossley. Do I have somebody who would like to speak against the motion? Okay, do I have somebody?
Carl, I'd like to speak against the motion, Deputy Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Bye, go ahead.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate the council in its response to the drought-affected Wellington Shire residents. The drought was an issue and is still going, directly affecting our ratepayers, and the help that we gave was fantastic and well received. However, COVID-19 is a worldwide problem. I must congratulate the state government on their initiatives. They have brought forward grants for small businesses of $10,000. They have delayed land tax and payroll tax relief. I must also congratulate the initiatives from the banks, where people that are struggling can delay their payments for their home loans and can catch that up later on. And I also must do a big congratulations of the initiatives of the federal government. They've spent billions of dollars in stimulus. The initial stimulus amount is up to $100,000 per business that employs people. Yes, that's $100,000. They have got the JobKeeper for eligible businesses. It's a subsidy of $1,500 per fortnight towards your employees. It's not now just for a month or two, it is actually for a 6-month period. Even when we get through this, hopefully in months to come, and people start to recover, the subsidy continues on to the end of September for a 6-month period. Even casuals that were only working 10 hours a week, they get the full $1,500 a fortnight subsidy for eligible employees. There is 2 top-up payments to pensioners, $750 each time. Pensioners received $1,500 more of income to get through this period. There is also the doubling of unemployment benefits. If I want unemployment benefits, I was getting $550 a fortnight. I'm now getting $550 a week to get through this period. In my view, both the federal and state government have addressed the capture issues for Australian residents. I have not seen personally my power or phone providers give me relief on their invoices, yet we're looking at getting relief on our rates. State government introduced rate capping to be a fair system to the general ratepayers. By not implementing the 2% suggested rate increase, we are affecting the Shire budget for generations to come, not just now. We can't recover that $1.1 million overnight. We're a business and our costs change like any others. Our costs go up and our payroll goes up. By not increasing our income, we have to reduce a service or future planned initiative. So I'm not in favour of implementing the 2% rate increase. I think that the state and federal governments have done a great job in helping ratepayers in the Wellington Shire to get through this pandemic. So I fully support Councillor Hull's recommendation and cannot support the 2% rate increase. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bye. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak for?
Well,
Councillor McCubbin?
Yeah, if nobody else wishes to, then I shall say a few words. And I'll begin, if you like, in some ways supporting the councillors who are opposing this. I think we need to recognise that this is not a time to be shy in local government. We have a vital role as the level of government which is closest to the people of ensuring that our services, our communities are looked after. When we come out the other side of this, we are going to need to have good sporting clubs to ensure that our communities bind together. We're going to need good cultural facilities so that our organisations can grow. We need business investment, and we need people holding your hand, if you like, and helping you out as we move ahead. This is certainly a role that local government has. We have 100-odd services that we provide to our local community, and it is very important that we maintain those services into the future. So, I mean, it's a very easy thing for people to say, well, you should cut rates or do this, but this is not a time in which we need to retreat into our hole. This is actually the time when we need to stand beside our community, and to do that, we need to have a fair and equitable rate base. However, we need to recognise that we are living in unusual times, that we have had a drought, we have had fires, we have had now a pandemic. And that triple whammy have affected our local businesses, affected our farming community, and even the general population. Not only has it affected them in terms of finances, but it's affected them in lots of other ways, socially, in terms of our community. People simply can't afford to do the things that they did. And all levels of government, are, if you like, pulling in their belt, are doing their bit for their local community, who are doing it tough. And so here in our rural community, where we're doing that tough, we have to balance between providing an appropriate level of goods and services with a rate which ensures that people can live through this. I know it means a $1.1 million deficit, which is significant. $1 million is $1 million. However, if you look at the rates and charges, they're about $63 million. If you like, it's very much equivalent to a household of, that's got $63,000 coming into your household, and you're taking out a $1,000 loan. That's the exact equivalent of it. You take out a $60,000 house and you take out a $1,000 loan. Now, I think all of us would recognise that that's not significant. And whilst I absolutely agree with my fellow councillors that this is a burden that we're going to have to pay off, this is something that is going to cause us some pain, I say that we have to have that pain, that we as local government need to learn to live more frugally. We have to absolutely consider every service. We absolutely have to consider whether we're doing things in the cheapest possible way. We do have to make sacrifices. We're going to have to look very carefully at that. And we're going to have to look at things like shared services, which means that we may have to share some of our essential services between councils as we move forward as a way of saving money through this pandemic and into the future. I agree this is something that we're going to have to revisit over the next few years. It's not going away, but I think at this time we must maintain our services at a correct rate and also give some value back to people who are doing it tough. And therefore, I support the current 0% rate increase.
Thank you, Councillor McCubbin. Are there any other councillors that wish to speak?
Against or for?
You can speak against, Councillor Ripper.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I take on board what everyone said. I've got a set of scales here. Very difficult decision. I'd like to say from the onset that I've spent a lot of time reading through the 2020 and 21 budget. I've spoken to some of our councillors who's been in council during the amalgamation. I've spoken to other councillors. I don't take my opposition lightly at all, but I am speaking for no for rate rise of 2%, and I will go through this in stages. I want to do the best for ratepayers, for all our ratepayers. It doesn't matter whether you live in Lycola, whether you live in Yarram, Dargo, Yarram again, or anywhere you live in Sale. We are all equal ratepayers. And you're aware, and it has been mentioned by Councillor Hole and Councillor Bye in opposition and by other councillors, that COVID-19 pandemic is something our generation has never seen, ever seen before. However, some of us will have had parents and grandparents who went through the Depression and World War II. During the Depression, if you didn't get what they called susso, which was work, you didn't eat. And as Councillor Bye has quite clearly outlined the amount of money that the federal and state government are giving out to our people, and from what I've picked up on, some people are earning more than they would have had the pandemic not have arrived. I have a friend who works and does not earn the amount of money, and has worked permanently for years, does not earn the amount of money that has been given out by the government to some people. So bear that in mind. Whilst last year's budget allocated $1 million to our farmers, now that was allocated in the form of cards, credit cards of $750. And why we did that with the debit card was that that ratepayer money that went towards that debit card would then be, with my debit card, I'm going into a shop within the Wellington Shire and I'm spending it. So it's staying in the Shire. However, if council move to zero rate rise, that money more than likely will remain in banks. And I'll go through a few figures, because at the moment, people who are listening to this, no rate rise, wow. So they're thinking, wow, when COVID's over, I might fly to Queensland. I might buy a new car. Well, it's not even going to buy a new tyre for some people for your car. So the headline, Wellington Shire freezes rates. It's a lovely headline. And I empathise with people at the moment who are doing it hard. So let's go through some figures. So if 2% of $1,200 is $24, and you can all do your additions, $36 if your rates were $1,800, $50 if your rates were $2,500. So by pooling all that money, that we'd give Mrs Brown $24, Mr Jones $50, etc., if we pooled all that money to that 1.1 million, we could, as a shire, and it's a bit like a wedding present or a birthday present's the trend now. Oh, let's not buy individual presents, let's buy them a big present. So we could then pool our money and use it for the betterment of all our Shire ratepayers. Now, put it this way, you've got $24 by not putting up your rates 2%. But we may have to use some of that money, maybe for our local businesses. You can't drive to Traralgon or Bairnsdale and back for $24 if your local business is closed. So I would just like, it's a big picture, a very big picture. It's a lot to take in. We also have, for those who are finding it hard, a rates hardship. So I have angst over this, and my courage of my convictions is to say, no, I would like 2% rate rise, because I believe that is good governance. That is good governance for our shire. We are put in a position to make decisions. It would be easy to say a decision and to say no rate rise and not speak on it. But I have decided, with knowledge that I've got from people and from print matter and speaking to people, that we need the 2% rate rise, because next year we don't know what's going to happen. The government has spent so much in a short period of time. We can't rely on the government to help us out. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Councillor Ripper. Councillor Stevens, I don't want to throw to you if you're not intending to talk, but would you like to say a few words?
Yes, thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Look, I support the budget as it has been drafted. I always thought that I would be in favour of continuing to have small rate rises, but in this unprecedented times, and given the circumstances, for some of our ratepayers, as Councillor Ripper has correctly pointed out, is not going to mean a lot. But I think that the council has to show solidarity with all its ratepayers on one hand. We have to maintain a business on the other. We aren't a small business. We're a big business in this area. With now just under 300 population and our budget of around $90 million. It's a very difficult decision to decide what we should do, but I support the concept of freezing the rates for this year only. And let us remember, I think one of the other councillors, and I can't remember who it was, did allude to the fact that we are going to have to review where we are after 6 months. So I think we need to signal that, Deputy Mayor, that this isn't a budget that we're going to be confident of running for 12 months. The state and the federal, as we know, are going to defer their budgets. We rely on a lot of state and federal support, particularly in capital works, in some cases in some OPEX situations. But in any event, I think that this is a prudent approach. We're fortunate that the council has been in a strong financial position with the council over the last few years, previous councils to ours, with the good work of our officers. We have managed to be in a prudent financial position, and fortunately we can do this year. But as I say, I'm reluctant to not support a rate cap, 2% rate rise, but I just think because of the circumstances that we need to do it to just show our community we're there on the ground with them. So thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. And I refer to Councillor Rossetti. Did you want to sum up?
Yes, thank you, Acting Mayor, and apologies for those typewriter sounds coming through. I'm still getting used to muting microphones and things in these circumstances. But thank you for all the comments also from the councillors. It's unusual to have such a split around a budget, but the points being made on both sides are very valid. I'd just sum up by saying that many in our community are doing it hard, and many were already struggling after several years of severe drought, followed by those devastating bushfires, and now, of course, COVID-19 and even the hint of floods. These are extraordinary times under a state of emergency, which we shouldn't forget. I'm just thinking of businesses like cafes and restaurants. Many are adapting by offering takeaway food, but these aren't really long-term sustainable ways of them dealing with business. The personal services that are just devastated, along with businesses in general who rely on people having disposable income, which has dried up. And of course, the employees who just can't get work, the casual and full-time ones who many can get that support that the council's referred to, but there are many that can't because of the eligibility. The rules are sometimes hit and miss. But also those people who are looking to get into the workforce who can't now because the jobs just aren't there. And of course, everyone's dealing with working from home, supervising their children's studies, staying safe, keeping track of family and friends while being socially isolated, but at the same time wondering how secure their income is and how they're going to pay those bills like their rates. It's an extraordinary time. Even some newspapers going into recess. I know, good on the Gippsland Times for staying open, and I'm sure it's difficult for them with the advertising revenues. And the Yarram Standard, good on Deb Lucas down there for starting up a newsletter to try and keep the community connected, and all of those other community newsletters that keep people together. But I'd have to say that when I heard Councillor Ripper's conversation about the Susso lines, every day I drive past the Centrelink office in Sale, and I've never seen line-ups outside that office. And now every day, every morning, there's people lining up. And it must be so difficult for so many of those people who are lining up who've been self-sufficient all their lives and are having to go there and ask for a hand up. It must be so difficult for them. And we don't know how long this is going to last for. I know that's been referred to already, but it's fair to say it won't be over quickly, and it's certainly not going to be over in weeks or months. And even when businesses can open up, many just won't be able to reopen their doors. And this will continue to impact on those people and those employees who work for them, and suppliers who provide for them, and the customers who rely on them. As Councillor Crossley and Councillor Bai said, state and federal government have instituted extraordinary support programs. And I was thinking we in local government should be seen to be doing our bit, and this is, to me, the bare minimum. And yes, this may in fact impact services, but I'd say 2% is not impossible to find. We are only talking about 2%. And we should always be looking for efficiencies like that. And in response to Councillor Hole's and Bai's concerns, we can seek to go above the cap in future years if we need to catch up to maintain services. There is a process for that, and people can actually go through that process later if we needed to. And I know that it will make things a little more difficult for council in delivering the services, but we just can't be ostriches and pretend that it's business as usual. To me, this is not just a good thing to do, it's the right thing to do. Supporting our community through tough times is not about choice, it's about what we should do as compassionate council, looking out for those around us. It's exactly what we do in every other emergency. We pull money out of our budget and we whack it into all sorts of things to help our community. And to all of our community, I say that we do all care about how tough you're doing it, and here we are all trying to do our bit to assist in these difficult times. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rossetti. And so now we'll put the motion to a vote. So those in favour, I would like you to say your name as opposed to putting up your hand.
Scott Rossetti.
Councillor McCubbin.
Councillor Crossley.
And those against? Would you please state your name?
Malcolm Hole.
Councillor Bai.
Councillor Ripper.
Councillor Stevens, I don't think I recorded your vote, or I never heard your name.
Mic on. He hasn't got his mic on.
Oh, is it?
Sorry, I have
Unmute. Yes.
I've unmuted myself. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm in favour.
You're in favour.
Councillor Stevens is in favour. Yes. Sorry, Ms. Deputy Mayor.
No, that is fine. That is.
And you as well, of course.
And me as well. And I am in favour of the rate freeze. So that is 5 to 3. And I will call the division so that the names can be recorded. So that is, so those that are for is Councillor Stevens, Councillor McCubbin, Councillor Rossetti, Councillor Crossley and Councillor Marr. And those that are against is Councillor Hole, Councillor Bai and Councillor Ripper. So that motion has carried.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. May I say a couple of words?
You may. Go ahead.
Thank you. Certainly, thank you to councillors for supporting the motion. I encourage people to make submissions to this draft budget. Members of our community may indeed support an increase in the budget, as has been argued around the table. Others may support the 0% we've just put forward in the draft budget. Others may even support reducing the rate burden. If you have an opinion, please make a submission. Again, though, I do reiterate Councillor McCubbin's comments around the property valuation changes. Even though this draft budget has a 0% change, some ratepayers may see a decrease, presuming that the budget is passed as it is. Some ratepayers may see a decrease in their rate bill, and others may see an increase simply due to the fluctuations in those relative values of the properties over the Shire. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rossetti. So we'll move on to C3, General Manager of Development, page 96, item C3.1, Gippsland Regional Livestock Exchange. Councillor Hull.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm going to move that Council resolves to continue to directly manage and operate the Gippsland Regional Livestock Exchange as it supports local employment and provides an essential service for the Wellington agricultural sector, which is a vital part of the Shire's economy. And two, that the information contained in the confidential document be designated confidential information under Section 77, Clause 2B of the Local Government Act of 1989.
Thank you, Councillor Hull. Do I have a seconder for that motion?
I think that was
Councillor Ripper.
Councillor Ripper.
Yes.
Seconds that motion, Deputy Mayor.
Okay, that's great. Does anyone oppose the motion? Then silence indicates that the motion is carried. Councillor Hull, would you like to speak?
Yeah, just briefly, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Back on the 1st of April 2018, the lessee that we had, who was leasing the sale yards from us, decided that they wanted to move closer to Melbourne to one of their, or two of their bigger complexes. And so we were left with the option of either running it, selling it, dividing it, or whatever. And the council of the day decided we'd do a business plan. And because being a rural shire, we looked at the impact on the town and the towns around us in employment and growth. Should the stock be sent to other centres for sale? And the business plan came up with a very positive result. So we took the management on, and this is what this, for a short time, and this is what this motion is for today. And what we have done as a council since we have been managing it was implemented a sheep electronic identification scanning, and the sheep numbers are improving. We launched the GRLE website. We now have the Meat and Livestock Corporation of Australia reporting on our sales. We've now secured also representation on the board of the Australian Livestock Sale Yards Association, which is a nice little pat in the back. We've expanded the live weight calf sales from Mondays and Wednesdays. We have a couple of new agencies that have now shown up. Introduce online streaming of sales, and the yards are travelling very well, considering that over 3 years of the drought, so many cattle were slaughtered and sent away, or the reproduction of the replacements just didn't happen. So everything looks bright and rosy. The sale yards are performing very well financially. They're not a drain on the rates. And we'll look forward to the good management of our staff up there, and we will continue to grow and develop that if this motion is passed.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hull. Moving on to item C3.2, Planning Decisions, February 2020. This is found on page 101 of today's agenda. Councillor Bye.
Deputy Mayor, I move the Council note the report on recent planning permit trends and planning application determinations between the 1st of February and the 29th of February 2020.
Thank you, Councillor Bye.
And I'm happy to second that.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCubbin. Does anyone oppose this motion? Then silence allows for this motion to be carried. Councillor Bai, did you want to speak to it?
Yes, thanks, Deputy Mayor. I'd just like to pass on the congratulations to the Planning Department again. They made 38 decisions, which is growing the Wellington Shire in buildings. And there's two things there that stand out. The Rosedale-Longford Road is the application for a new broiler farm, which has gone through. And on the Toongabbie Road is another application for a broiler farm. So we keep growing that industry in the Shire, which is fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bai. It's very positive indeed. Moving on to item C, 3.3, Central Gippsland Tourism CGT Quarterly Report for January to March 2020. This can be found at page 110 of the agenda today. Councillor Ripper?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to move that Council receive the confidential report from Central Gippsland Tourism, CGT, at item F1.2, Central Gippsland Tourism, Marketing Activity Report and Central Gippsland Tourism, Campaign Concept 2020 for the quarter January to March 2020.
Thank you, Councillor Ripper. And do I have
Deputy
a second?
Mayor, yes, I'd like to second that, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stevens. Does anyone oppose this motion? Then the motion is carried. Councillor Ripper, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, just short. Because of the COVID-19, there really has been some Skype meetings, etc. But on the ground, as you are all aware, a lot of activities have not been able to take place. However, there is a memorandum of understanding for 18 months between the Central Gippsland Tourism Group and the Shire, and that has all been worked through at the moment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ripper. Moving on to C4, General Manager, Built and Natural Environment. Item C4.1, Declared Waste Boundaries Review. This can be found on page 113 of today's agenda. Councillor Stevens.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Look, I just crave your indulgence because the motion as listed in the agenda, I'd just like to add two words at the start of that, and that would be that Council approve the revised designated waste collection boundaries as defined in the attached waste collection maps.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. And do we have a seconder for that motion?
I'm happy to second that motion.
Councillor Crosley, thank you. Does anyone oppose this motion? Then I take it that silence indicates that this motion is carried. Councillor Stevens, would you like to talk?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. It's interesting to note that at the moment the council has some 36 designated declared collection areas, mostly in residential zones throughout the Shire, plus approximately 660 grandfathered collections on rural properties. I think mostly on roads that connect up the designated areas. This proposal will just do a minor variation to our current declared garbage boundaries for both the towns of Hayfield and Yarram. And these collection areas, of course, I think were last reviewed in a major way in about 2008 as part of the current contract for garbage collection, which was, I believe, issued in 2009 from memory, and probably should have already been completed, except there's been a couple of extensions. I think firstly because we were considering changes to the garbage collection manner, and then more recently, of course, there was the major problem, which is hard to remember now with all the other things that have gone on, the major problem that they had with the recycling collection. That was probably a huge issue for us about 12 months ago, and yes, it's funny to think how things have changed. But I note that we are moving towards a new long-term collection contract It has been extended at the moment until I think 2021, and it's looking like we will try for an extension for one more year. And if you read the report, you'll see that there is going to be a review of our whole waste collection boundary process before we issue the contract for the next garbage contract. But in the meantime, this is basically a minor adjustment which will just bring everything into line for the moment. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Moving on to C5 General Manager, Community and Culture. I note that there is nothing to report there. D, urgent business. Mr CEO, is there any urgent business?
No urgent business, Deputy Mayor, nor are there any questions in the chat room.
Oh, okay. No gallery or chat room comments. I guess that brings us to declare the meeting closed at 4:14 today. Thank you, everyone.